All right, here with Matchroom Boxing's Eddie Hearn. Eddie, a good little show up there in Brisbane this weekend.
Yeah, it's going to be good fun actually. When George Kambosos fought Jake Wyllie back in March, Jake came in at 5 days' notice, and Steve Della said to me, "Look, if he does well, will you help me out with another fight for him?" And I said, "You got my word." And he did better than well. I mean, he really, really took George to the well in Sydney. And Steve phoned me up and talked about the fight with Huey Dib, who I saw have a war with Liam Wilson recently. And I just thought it was a really, really good domestic fight. Obviously, opportunities for some of our other stable in Sky Nicholson getting back in a homecoming fight. And, it's important to us that we stay active in the Australian market. This is our kind of third show, maybe fourth if you include the last Jai fight as well. And I think it's a really important market. I think there's some really good fighters over here. And I think we just got to keep chipping away with the zone. And I think there's a lot of upside in Australian boxing.
We might just pick up with your thoughts, Ed, on the Australian boxing scene. More broadly, got some big names: Tim Tszyu, Nikita Tszyu, Jai Opetaia, Sam Goodman, Paro. Sky Nicholson. What are your sort of thoughts?
I think that you just reeled off, like 80% of the world-class fighters, and there's more as well. And I think that when you look at the size of the Australian boxing market, the fact that you can name so many that are competing at world level, I mean, for me, I think Jai Opetaia right now is the pound-for-pound king of Australian boxing. I feel like he should actually be a much bigger star than he is. When he beat Bradis with two broken jaws, in my opinion, he should be an Australian sporting superstar, not just a boxing superstar. Tim, I know, has struggled at the real elite world level, but he's a very entertaining world-class fighter. Justice Honey, I think there's so much upside in. Terra Moana, our heavyweight, from the Olympics, I think he's going to be around for a long time. Paro's a great fighter, world champion. You've got Shanika Johnson, undisputed world champion. So many other female world champions as well. It's just a case of trying to build their star and their profile behind a pay-per-view wall. I was just saying about Nikita Tszyu, just boxed. He boxed on pay-per-view. It's like $70. It's crazy. Like, that should be a free-to-air production to really grow the sport. It's not the promoter's fault. It's just that the broadcasters aren't yet willing to make the investment in boxing to pay rights fees. They just say, yeah, we'll put it on pay-per-view, and whatever it generates, good luck to you, kind of thing. But you got Nikita needs to be built as a star, and you got a very small audience watching because he has to fight behind a pay-per-view wall.
Joe Opetaia, there's been some news out the past couple of days, sort of mandated for his mandatory there. What can you tell us about Jai's, next move?
Yeah, it's a bit frustrating. I think Jai's probably frustrated because really the only thing we want to do is to try and unify. You have two other champions, Badu Jack, who's been forced to fight the rematch, and Gilberto Ramirez. For me, Opetaia Ramirez is one of the best fights in the sport. We accepted an offer from Turki Al Sheikh to do that fight in November. Unfortunately, Gilberto Ramirez had the injury, he had the surgery, and then from there, he can't fight till next year. So then you're stuck really with two options. One is to fight your mandatory, and the other one is to move up to heavyweight. But I really don't want Jai to move up to heavyweight until he's unified the division, because I'm very sure he can become undisputed. But, unfortunately, at the moment, we're treading water because of the injuries, really, to the other champion. So Sin Cara will probably be next. I actually have a meeting with Mick Francis in a couple of hours to talk through how and where we're going to try and do that fight. But Jai is a fantastic fighter. I really believe he can win a world heavyweight title as well. But I would love to see him unify the division before he moves up.
How do you sort of, build his star here, Eddie? You said he should be a massive sort of pay-per-view star here in Australia. How do you sort of get him to that point?
I mean, you have to really, really work away at it. And, not every fighter is prepared to put the real hard rounds in of media rounds, turning up to events and really being pushed by a big promotional company and a big sports agency and that kind of stuff. Jai is a really down-to-earth individual family man who's not really that fussed about being a superstar. But obviously, at the same time, our job is we want him to be a superstar so we can make the big fights, make him the biggest purses, So, part of that comes from the fighter, but also part of that comes from being involved in big fights and getting the media behind you. I just feel like in Australian boxing, because boxing is down the priority list from the media, it just doesn't get the recognition that perhaps we'd hope or it should. Like I said to you, I really feel like when Jai beat Bradis, that was unbelievable what he did that night. To come through that fight with two fractures and breaks in his jaw, like that's a hell of a story. But I think you need to tell the story as well of all those individual fighters, and all of them have great stories as well.
So this Sin Cara fight, would you sort of push, to have that fight here in Australia, or what are your sort of initial thoughts?
I think so. I mean, I think he's had 2 fights on the Gold Coast. The Naika fight performed very well. And that was a really good fight. Obviously, last time out against Quezzo, much easier fight, less name recognition. Sin Cara is a much better fight than that, but it's difficult because obviously at the same time he's not a big name, and people are saying, "Well, when's Jai going to unify? When's he going to do this?" So I think and I was saying to Terra Moana earlier, because these guys are fighting on DAZN around the world. Actually, Jai Opetaia is actually a big name in the UK. And he's also a big name in America, like in terms of among fight fans, but that audience is actually quite big. So, I think Jai even returning to the UK to fight has substance. He's not boxed in America yet. I think why not try and put him over there as well? But it's the value of the fight, unfortunately, is just not overly significant.
Now, Tim Tszyu, last time you were out here, you said the jury was still out on Tim Tszyu. That caused quite a stir here amongst the sort of local boxing scene.
I was right, though, wasn't I?
What did you make of his performance against Sebastian Fundora?
Yeah, look, whenever I give my opinion on things like that, I'm just giving it to you as a fan, right? So there's no agenda for me. I really like Tim Tszyu. I think he's really entertaining. What has been proven is that he's not good enough to fight and win at elite level. And, I believe there are actually levels above Sebastian Fundora. Jaron Ennis, Terence Crawford, these kind of people. They're much better fighters than Fundora. I thought the last defeat was particularly crushing because the first fight he did really well and the cut definitely affected him. Maybe if he didn't have that cut, maybe he could have won the fight. But then getting stopped by Murtsalayev and then coming and getting stopped by Fundora, it was a big blow. A big blow. And, fight fans are very quick to criticise or sort of put you to the back of the queue. And it'll be interesting now what they do with Tim, because he's got to make the investment now to come back. And I think that, for me, should be to have a couple of fights to get back in the winning groove. I don't know about his training. I don't know where, but he's had a lot of tough fights, and those fights take their toll. So, listen, I wish him all the best. And when I said the jury's out on him, I know people come back and didn't like it, but that's the reality of people outside of the Australian bubble. That's the opinion of Tim Tszyu. We're not sure whether he is elite world class, and he's proven that he's not. He's a world-class fighter. He's very entertaining. He's a tough man, but he hasn't been able to secure victory at that level. And I don't know what the answer is. Maybe he just can't. Maybe he's not good enough. Maybe he needs to change his training. Maybe he's got, I don't know. But as well, Jay, it's like over here in Australia, you can be the king of that pond or bubble or whatever you want to call it. But when you mix it in that big stage, it's not easy. It's really not easy. Like it doesn't, you can't criticise Tim because he couldn't beat Murtsalayev and Fundora. They're very good fighters. Not many people can. But what does he have left,
I guess, what's the road back for him? What about some fights like, you got Conor Benn there around that weight division? Is that a fight you could see?
Yes, that's a war, another war, But it all depends. I mean, I don't know Tim personally, and Matt and George know what they're doing. They're going to talk to him and see. But it comes down to the individual. Like, do you really want to rebuild? Are you interested in that? It takes a year to rebuild. Tim might just turn around and say, "Do you know what? I've got a couple of fights left in me. Just make me the biggest fights you can. Throw me in. If I lose, I lose. Hopefully I win. Or no, let's get a new training team together. Let's make some changes. Let's come back with a couple of wins. But then the money goes down as well. You know, it's very difficult to get the fighter to invest in all of a sudden taking less money to rebuild. So it's down to him as an individual. I don't know him. It's wherever his heart's at and however long he feels he has left to give the sport.
Just last one on Tim. Do you think it was perhaps a mistake to take that rematch with Fondora so soon?
Probably. But he did have that Joey Spencer fight, didn't he? So it wasn't like he went from Mertzalayev into Fondora. Like the reality is he going to get any better? Or is this the fighter? You know, and the problem is the hype around Tim. Like when he went into the Mertzalayev fight, when he fights over here, he's fighting at a slightly lower level. You can be strong and walk people down and beat them up, but you can't think you can just walk down Mertzalayev and just beat him up. This big, strong Russian, you know, it was just a bad idea. But for me, I didn't expect that to happen against Fondora in the second fight. I thought he could win that fight. And I thought it would be really competitive, but let's be honest, it wasn't really, was it? I mean, he's tough, but that was a worrying defeat because I think he's better than that, or I thought he was better than that.
Just a word on Nikita Tszyu. What are your impressions on him?
Just from what I've seen, just a real strong, tough, like a lot of the attributes that Tim had early in his career as well. You know, the ability to walk forward, heavy-handed, strong physically. I like him. I mean, I don't know him either, but I think he's quite quirky. You know, I watch his interviews and he's an interesting character, isn't he? But he's good. I think he's good for the sport, and he's a young man with a lot of talent, and hopefully he can go on and win a world title.
We saw DAZN's acquisition of Foxtel earlier this year. Would you sort of, work in with some of the promoters here moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think you always want to do it yourself in new markets, but we've learned over the years sometimes it's good to build partnerships. I mean, we've worked with Tasman fighters, Angelo, even Steve Della this week. Like, I'm happy to definitely work with them. Obviously, now with DAZN, we've just about to start really looking at how that acquisition will affect Matchroom shows here. We did do a pay-per-view on Foxtel with George Kambosos against Richardson Hitchens. Did good numbers for us, actually. So, I think the plan really is to try and build some of those bigger fights in Australia, obviously with Justice Hearn, with Jai, with Sky Nicholson, with Terra Moana, but they've got to be in big fights. I think if you're going to use that platform for pay-per-view, it's got to be the right kind of fight. And, DAZN's numbers are very solid in Australia, and we look forward to another good show this Saturday.
Nice one, Eddie. Always appreciate your time, mate.
Cheers, mate. Good to talk to you.
Thanks, Guy.